Dankjewel. Dit is Shnee en ik was today I'm continuing our tutorial for Urdu, otherwise known as silent reading. And I know I'm early both in terms of starting the actual live stream and when the live stream is taking place, but I realized a little bit too late that I have a birthday party on tonight, so I won't be able to do the live stream then, and I didn't want to miss out on doing the live stream together. So we're doing it now, and I'm starting a little bit early so we can get all the formalities and things out of the way by the time the hour strikes, and then we can just go into it. And also, it seems like YouTube has somewhat changed up its behind the scenes of the live stream, so I'm feeling a little bit thrown off by that, but I hope the audio is still okay. It's a bit weird, but at least it's loud today, I think. I hope. So we pop up the chat in the meanwhile. I don't know how many people are going to be able to join, but I figured it was best to have it rather than not having it at all. Okay. There we go. Let me just make sure everything seems fine on my side. So, we left off on Feydu being overcome with, I think, a mixture of lost and love for Moenjo. So I'm kind of excited for today. Also, just a quick note, I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing 2 hours or 3 hours today. I want to try and read as quickly as possible and see where we're at by the end of the 2-hour mark, and then I'll decide if we keep going for a little bit more or if that's where we stop, because ideally I want to give myself a little bit of time to get ready before the party. So yeah, and also if you hear I take 10-minute breaks on the hour to just refill my drink, whether it's tea or coffee, and I think that's it. I think we can get started. I am sorry, I'm kind of doing a few documents. So I hope that is everything. I hope I haven't forgotten anything. And yeah. Chapter 115, Verhovensky 25. The dining table was rattled by having Lowendraw descend upon it out of nowhere. The tall, slender wine bottle suffered an unexpected calamity. It shook a couple of times, then fell and violently shattered to pieces. Oopsie. The thickly smelling alcohol dispatched its scent in full force, filling the whole dining room with it. The last adult people had to temporarily resume their intellects and clean up the mess on the floor. What a way to phrase that. Where are your shoes? Lowendraw asked at first. Then he remembered. Feydu's slippers seemed to have fallen off when he dragged him back to the living room from the entrance hall. He felt rather embarrassed, gave a dry cough, and waved a hand. As he cleaned up the pieces of broken glass, he grumbled, "You're not wearing shoes. Stay back, and you won't say anything clearly. You just start nibbling." Oh my gosh. "You won't make anything official. You're just taking advantage of me, you hoodlum." Feydu retreated into a corner, his gaze sweeping over Lowendraw's back. Pulled taut because he was bent over, he crossed his arms over his chest. "I'm not a hoodlum. I'm a sadist's son. Later, if the disease takes me, I may not let you talk to other people, not let you be alone with friends, put tracking and listening devices on your phone and your car. If that doesn't do, I may even lock you in the basement and not let other people see you, wishing I could eat you up. Are you scared?" "The only reason why I'm not reacting to that is because I don't believe Peso would ever actually stoop to that. Mojo gathered the broken glass into a bag, then wrapped it with tape, making it into a soft and harmless ball. Hearing these brave and proud words, he gave a careful laugh. Who, you? Stop showing off. Get me a rag. Yeah, as if Mojo would let himself be taken advantage of in that way. Fedu gazed fixedly at him for a moment, went around the pool of red wine, and picked up a small wiping rag. He felt that his chest, which he just personally gouged out, was uncommonly empty, as if an enormous stone had cracked open with a bang, and countless secret, repressed, twisted thoughts, like little worms living hidden under the stone, had all fled in an uproar. Their darkness revealed in the light. Oh! Peter passed the rag to Lowenthal, but didn't let go when he reached out to take it. Lowenthal looked up at him and saw the lamplight refracted in Peter's glass-like eyes. There seemed to be a faint human warmth floating there. Then, tugging on the rag, made out of old long underwear, at last nodded and acknowledged, "Yes, I care for you." I mean, that might as well be a love confession coming from him. The flashy mountain bike blown sky high, the old game machine that had accompanied him as he'd grown up, the door that once hidden a little cat. The skewers was too much to me on them, the flowers left in the cemetery once a year, the countless mutual ridiculous quarrels. Today it seemed that all those past events were strung together on a golden thread, showing a faint outline in the thick black mist of his memories, lighting his past and future. That's a beautiful description. Mojo felt that he seemed to have been waiting all his life to hear these words. The corners of his mouth pursed slightly in an almost smile. Then, without making a sound, he suddenly pulled away the rag, tossed it on the ground, dipping his hands into the wash basin, and without even drying them off, put his arms around Fedu's waist and dragged him off. Not wearing shoes was fine. It spared kicking them off again. As for the dining room floor covered in wine, at any rate, the glass had been cleaned up. There was no need to worry Louis would step on any. The rest would probably be fine. I mean, you might end up with a drunk cat at your disposal. But sure. Louisville was occupied with a myriad of state affairs each day. Each night it got up 3 or 4 times to patrol its territory and have a midnight snack. Its itinerary was very busy. After today's first short sleep was over, Master Cat leapt out of the second bedroom and saw that the master bedroom's door was half open and a light was on inside. Its pricked-up ears moved slightly, and it trotted over, intending to go over and investigate what was happening in its territory. But midway it was attracted by the peculiar smell in the dining room. Louisville circled cautiously around the red liquid on the floor, sniffing. It was unable to resist licking its sticky paws. Ordinary cats and dogs have a keen sense of smell and dislike tobacco and alcohol. But Comrade Louisville was innately different. It was a drunkard among cats. After one lick, it discovered that the taste suited its liking, so it put its head down to experience it. Okay, please don't feed your cats alcohol in the real world because it is a pack of poisonous to their liver, I believe. But luckily this is a book. Suddenly, it heard someone give a brief, insistent "ah." Master Cat only then remembered its mission and raised its neck with difficulty. It was just about to follow the sound not expecting that as soon as it raised its leg, its steps would turn. It wavered left and tottered right for a few steps, bumped its head into the side of the couch, and lay down on its stomach, not moving. Oh, poor thing. Christmas Eve came once a year, like an old candle wick. It didn't last long enough. The water vapor on the window quietly solidified, turning into snow white grime. Some fragments of the soul was haunting Vader's subconscious, reality blending with illusion. It woke him in the middle of the dimness of sleep, his consciousness startled, rising and falling, then settled back into position. But when he opened his eyes, he found that the bedside light was gone. Lowendraw was beside him, watching him. Seeing that Fedu wasn't sleeping soundly, Lowendraw at last reluctantly turned off the weak lights and gently kissed the top of his head. Sleep. I'm going back to work overtime tomorrow. You rest. There's no need to get up as early as me. You say that as if you can get up early, Fedu thought, but before he could express this taunt, the returning drowsiness had warmly enfolded him. He seemed to hear distant piano music. There seemed to be a slightly thin woman with her back to him, sitting next to a bright window, sunlight falling on her as if it wanted to melt her silhouette. She was carelessly pressing on the piano keys, somewhat rustily playing a tune. The next day, the great Captain Law didn't fall short of expectations. Extreme joy turned to sorrow. He once again got up late, because the alarm on his phone had been turned off, and the human one had been up to his tricks and hadn't woken him. Fedu had already moved the hung-over Loyuko into its cat bed, taken some wet wipes and cleaned up the wine-stained floor and the cat's paws, and got neatly dressed. As he scrolled through the news on his phone, he repeated back last night's words in great astonishment. Didn't I tell you to rest and not get up as early as me? I couldn't bear to wake you. Oh my word. Lowendraw, toothbrush in mouth, stuck up his middle finger at him. Fedu cheerfully watched how shameless the braggart took. Let's try this again. Why am I struggling so much today? Fedu cheerfully watched how the shameless braggart took getting hit in the face with his own words, then ungrudgingly drove him to work. Oh, right, Lowendraw, sitting in the passenger seat, swallowed down his last bit of egg roll and got out a napkin to wipe his hands. I just remembered, when the last picture album project was set up, it was 13 years ago, the year after Gu Zhao's death. Could the picture album project have something to do with him? If Shah Yang told the truth, if Gu Zhao really did get in trouble investigating Lu Bosheng, then it's very likely, Fedu said. Lu Bosheng isn't the only one there. It looks to me that it's likely he had found Lu Bosheng's tracks, and he discovered other wanted criminals where he was hidden. That Lu was likely one of their hideouts. Wow, Lowendraw paused. After a good while, he said, "There is one thing I'm wondering about." "Yes?" "Ordinarily, out of the very special circumstances, when we go to investigate and collect evidence, we bring at least one colleague along. Tracking down an escaped criminal's whereabouts doesn't relate to internal person, doesn't relate to internal personnel, and it doesn't concern matters of security. There's nothing that can't be openly investigated. If Gu Zhao was framed, then why would he be framed all on his own?" It's a fair point. I can't remember what the answer to that was. Had he not told anyone before going to the Louvre? Or had he in fact notified a certain person, and that person had sold them out? Cloudiness flashed over Lowendraw's brow. Then he changed the subject, saying, "I haven't asked yet. how did you corner Shahayam yesterday? I didn't corner him. There's a keychain hanging on his waist. He sounds different from other people when he walks. I was about to leave when I heard him coming. When you, wow, when your short meeting started, I saw Shahayam come in shaking most of it on his hands. It had been less than 10 minutes. He wouldn't have a problem with frequent urination at such a young age, would he? There was no one there. I thought something was off, so I hid where the cleaning supplies are kept. I love how detail-oriented it is. Where the cleaning supplies are kept. Owenjo stared. No wonder Shahayam had been clueless. Then how did you know his phone's passcode? I guessed. Once someone borrowed his work computer, and that was the password he gave them. Pedro said absently. Shahayam has a strong sense of purpose, and he's obsessed. That kind of person would normally use some numbers with a special meaning for his password, and it's usually the same for everything. For someone like Taran, it would be fairly simple. I guess his password would be a combination of a birthday, a name, a phone number, something like that. Xiao Qiao has a very strong work-life balance, so her work password and private password would definitely be different. I figure her office computer account's password is the office room number or her badge number or a combination of the two. It's kind of creepy how much you could probably infer from someone like about passwords just from how someone is. Owenjo curiously asked, "Then what do you guess my salary card's pin is?" "What are you laughing at?" Fede looked at him. "Why would I want to guess the pin to a bookmark?" Damn, the shade! That was a terrible burn. Lowenjo, ... He oddly felt that he'd woken up and found his treatment reverted to the days before the liberation. The scoundrel who'd constantly mocked him, calling him elderly, better off selling youtiao, and old uncle, had been out of sight for a long time, and now he'd silently struck again. A great. As expected, all those honeyed words and considerate behavior had only been put on to coax him, all out of covetousness for his body. The streets were filled with the atmosphere of the approaching New Year. Merchants bade with each other to launch sale promotions. Insignias, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, hung banners reading Happy New Year filled the cheerful city center. In the shops, the happy sounds of jingle bells and Happy New Year mixed together, making no distinction between one's own things and another's, rising and falling as if in a row. The thin layer of ice on the road had already been shoveled away by the early rising sanitation workers. It was a very light and breezy drive, even though working overtime on Saturdays was a bitter anguish. Both the content of the overtime and the overtime itself. Bowenjo bickered with Feidu the whole way. The smile hadn't cooled yet when he saw a middle-aged husband and wife at the office door. Judging from their faces and outfits, they weren't at all well off. The woman's face was freckled, and her voice was sharp. The guy was a little fat, with somewhat slouched shoulders and a gloomy expression. There was a dull grey briefcase tucked under his arm. "No, our child already said none of it happened. The kids in that class don't understand anything. They're just spreading falsehoods and making up rumors, making so much noise that the school can't handle it. There's nothing wrong with our child. She never told any lies." The woman was speaking very rapidly, constantly making gestures of refusal with her sharp hands. "Conrad, police officer, don't believe everything you hear and casually call people in for questioning. It'll make a bad impression for us at work. If you didn't know better, you'd think we'd done something wrong." Taran hastily followed up. Could you have the child come herself and talk a little? It's not enough to come to a public security bureau once. We have to come twice. The woman's voice suddenly grew louder, echoing in the corridor. She's a 15-year-old girl, not a pickpocket or a robber. She's still sick with fear. If something happens to her, will the government compensate us? What is all this? Where is your superior? Um, I'm thinking it's Wang. Was her name Wang Shao? I think. Because this doesn't seem like the type of attitude that the bully girl would have, because she seems like she comes from a rich family. But then, if you care about your child so much that you can't bear the thought of her being interrogated or brought back to the bureau, shouldn't you care enough to not want her to go back to that horrible school where she was sexually abused? Like, make it make sense. Sorry. Taran opened his mouth, feeling that he couldn't very well say what came next, and Chow understood and hastily came up to take over. That's it. When do you think you would take her to the hospital for an examination? What examination? Why should she be examined? Her words seemed to infuriate the woman. She put her hands on her waist and stretched out her neck, seemingly ready to grow her hard beak and peck out a hole in Wang Chao's skull. What do you mean? You're a young lady yourself. How can you make such an unfounded attack? But of course it wouldn't be you taking the heat if this gets out. She's not attacking anyone for daring to suggest that someone may have been sexually abused. That sounds like you would make it your own daughter's fault for being sexually abused. What the hell are you on about? Oh, sorry. The gloomy-faced man tugged at her. She said it didn't happen, so it didn't happen. Don't waste time talking to them. We're busy. Let's go. As they spoke, the middle-aged husband and wife were already sweeping out like the wind. Taran rubbed his face, walked over, and helplessly spread his hands at the woman's door. Did you see that? That's how it is. Aside from the insignificant bystanders and the others have either sent lawyers to kind of haggle or they're behaving like that, those wouldn't be the Billy when you young your Jean's parents. That didn't look like a school trustee. Is it someone else in their gang? Taran sighed. Those are Wang Shao's parents. Mudro was somewhat taken aback. Then he frowned. Why were the victim's parents more anxious to plead innocence than the rapists? Thank you. Like, what the hell? He called Wang Shao. The girl went to her face, and the parents denied she was interfered with at school. They came over first thing in the morning to kick up a fuss. Our law, if it's true, it would be hard to prove. If youth and middle school had insisted on maintaining that all was well, they could have said that this was all a small dispute among students. If it hadn't been for Shashaman telling them about Shao being dragged into the boys' dormitory, the city bureau's intervention would have been comparatively powerless. No one had been badly injured, and even if they had, it was too late to appraise the condition of the injuries now. It just, even if it was a situation of, oh, my child said nothing happened, I don't think that attitude is the sincerest one if you're well intentioned. Insults to people's characters were hard to prove, even if it was hard evidence, you still couldn't do anything to a crowd of fast-learning children. At most, there would be a critical education, and then the students would be sent back where they came from. Perhaps those involved had experienced persecution and fear as though living in a world without justice. But seen with a lawyer's uh, seen with a lawyer's staff guard, it was only a casually mentioned little matter. In the group sexual assault matter, the perpetrators had all determined to keep their mouths shut under their lawyer's advice, while the victim's lips were sealed. She was determined not to admit what she had suffered. Again, it just feels like the way the parents are handling it is not in their child's best interest. Regardless of Wang Shao's attitude, I feel like if they had cared about her more, that's not how they would approach protecting her. Chapter 160, Verhovensky 26. Boss, how about we just forget it? And Charles spoke suddenly. They all turned their heads at once to look at her. When Meng Chao was making an appearance as a soft-hearted policewoman, it was always an exaggerated performance. But she was excellent at glaring and threatening. She was never afraid when it came to a fight. Aside from starvation and cilantro, there seemed to be nothing she feared. The words "forget it" didn't seem to be in her dictionary. Meng Shao isn't willing to show herself, so let her be. And Chao paused, then continued. Isn't the important point for us Fang Bun's murder? We have other lines of inquiry after all. Sha Shan'an told us that it was Wei Wenxian who put the tracking device on her phone. If this Wei Wenxian really is connected to Lu Guosheng, then he could have plotted this on his own. However bad he is, he's still a student. He still has to go to school and live there. He can't possess such vast resources. Why don't we focus on investigating on his parents? That line of thought makes sense, Tarrant found, but while homicide is one case, the other things are also criminal cases. We can't pick and choose among cases by severity, can we? I don't remember criminal law having a principle of catching the big and letting the little go. And the thing is, here Lang Chao kind of demonstrates what I would expect from her parents is the thing of not wanting to traumatize or force her if something like that has indeed happened. So it feels almost like Meng Chao is caring more for Wang Xiao than her parents are. And maybe I'm being too harsh on them, but I'm not liking the vibe I'm getting from them. Meng Chao opened her mouth, then swallowed down her words. And when Joel said, "What's wrong?" I know we have to investigate things when we encounter them, but Meng Chao hesitated, pausing. Never mind a child. Even an adult encountering this kind of thing wouldn't necessarily let others know. It's already bad enough for her. I feel like going to compel her like this is rather hard-hearted. Because a victim always seems to have done something wrong, it's always a matter of there must be something to hate about a particular person. Who has that kind of attitude? As soon as one audacious rapist came along and marked her as weak and easy to bully, hundreds of thousands of rapists would begin to stir. Even if they didn't dare to put the theory into practice, they'd mentally flock around to have a look, peeling off her clothes and stamping on her 10,000 times. Rowan was about to speak when a colorless voice from behind interrupted him. Captain Law. Shahayang walked over stiffly, tightly holding a craft paper folder. Without making a sound, he held it out to Bonjour. Bonjour looked at him. not reaching out to take it. What's this? The self-examination I wrote, Shahayam said dully. I request to return to the team. Taran was bewildered. What's Xiao Xiao writing a self-examination for? Shahayang looked at him blankly. In the ways of the world, Little Glasses was as sluggish inert as an inert gas. He didn't realize why Taran didn't know. George deftly opened the folder and scanned his monster book. Though Shahayang ordinarily didn't especially like talking to people, his writing style was something else. It was simply ceaseless chatter. This thing was nearly 10,000 characters long, all written by hand, a thick stack of writing papers. Oh, goodness. Having skimmed through it once, Lowenthal laughed coldly and smacked the epistle against Shahayam's chest. Who told you I'd let you return to the team if you wrote a self-examination? Were you playing house? Go away and pull your heels. Shahayam, like a helpless, nearly sighted Jiangxi, stood where he was with his whole body tense, his face turning red. He was a freshly boiled Jiangxi too. Fei took his head. Fei shook his head, went around him, and was about to go into the office to pour a cup of coffee and warm up when someone pulled him to a halt. Is that President Fei? Fei's brow furrowed, but in the time it took to turn his head, realistic, happy surprise appeared on his face. Oh, President Wei! Crap. Of course he knows from Wei Wenqian's dad. The window looked in the same direction as him and saw a middle-aged man who could have been called lean. He was immaculately dressed, with slightly sunken cheeks and long, narrow brows. His upper eyelids looked very unusual. They seemed to have been carved by a hatchet, and hardly curved at all. They were only sharp, horizontal lines. When he smiled, even his smile was weighed down by those peculiar eyelids, making him look like a jackal who just finished drinking blood. I can't picture it, but the description doesn't sound kind. Sounds quite vicious, actually. Hi, sorry, I don't know how long ago you sent that message. Just what? So this was Wei Jianhong. Wei Jianhong looked at Fei Du in faint astonishment. What are you doing at a public security bureau first thing in the morning, President Fei? Chasing his husband? While Fei Du hadn't widely publicized what an uncommon school he'd ended up studying at, he hadn't purposely concealed it either. If you took a bit of time to inquire, you would be able to find out. These sons of the wealthy wasted time and money all day and went to play in a pigsty. There wasn't anything surprising here. But seeking novelty was one thing. It wasn't a very good idea to let people know he meddled in cases. Feidu felt rather regretful. With Wei Jianhong and his son here, he couldn't hang around the city bureau. I am trying my best. I don't know if we're going to succeed, but we're trying. Came to drop someone off. Saying so, Feiru gathered up his collar, which was hanging loose. Lowering his voice, he gave Wei Jianhong a very meaningful expression. Isn't that a good way to ask forgiveness for making a person unhappy last night? Wei Jianhong gave a dry cough, his gaze sweeping over the criminal police officers not far off, feeling that these shameless rich kids really were outrageously bold in their lust and would dare to hit on any sort of person. You young people. What I bet you he's gonna just assume that the person Feidu was talking about is Mang Chao. I feel sorry for Mang Chao just at the thought of it. There are there are a lot of benefits. Feidu drew close and spoke into his ear, saying in a low voice, "It feels different, and bodies that exercise constantly are very good. But most importantly, there's quite a few things you can accidentally find out at once." Wei Jianhong's expression changed slightly, remembering how after Zhou Zhenmao's death, the Fei clan had been the first to react. Fei took half a step back, brushing his thumb against his lips, displaying a faintly visible coquettish smile. That just sounds attractive. I'm not even gonna lie. Come on, lower jaw. Dot dot dot. He was quietly watching a certain person's performance. Feidu, seemingly very concerned, asked, "So, what are you doing coming here during the weekend?" A faint dry smile appeared on Wei Jianhong's face. He reached over and pushed the teenage boy standing behind him to the front. The boy had the same thin lips and sharp chin as Wei Jianhong, and he was much better looking than his father, like a student chairman in an idol drama. Oh my word. That's quite an accurate description if I think about who they like the actor who they chose for him. I could believe that. He wasn't at all shy in front of sorry if you heard that. He wasn't at all shy in front of strangers, smiling before he spoke, greeting Pedro with perfect courtesy. Children are debts, Wei Jianhong sighed. Perhaps he was answering Feidu, and perhaps he was saying it for the police to hear. He was deliberately raising his voice. "It's this disappointing brat who's been stirring up trouble at school and bullying other children so badly they couldn't stand it and ran away. I ask you, what is he up to? It's because he hasn't been brought up properly. I'm ashamed. I brought him here to cooperate with the investigation." There's just so much wrong in that cat remark that I couldn't even know where to start unpacking it. The young Wei Wenchen was unmoved, his expression calm. He only fittingly lowered his head a little. Wei Jianhong slapped his back. "What did I teach you at home? A fly won't sting a seamless egg. This is happening because you've done something wrong. If you hadn't been bullying your schoolmates, where would those rumors have come from? Where would these troubles be coming from?" The tips of Feidu's eyebrows moved. He put in a word. "Rumors? There's a girl at their school," Wei Jianhong said in the tone of one saying something too embarrassing to mention, frowning at Feidu. "Because of this business, there were some rather unpleasant rumors going around. We're all right, but but if this all gets out, it'll look bad for the girl, won't it? I ran into the girl's parents at the door when I was on my way in. They said there's nothing in any of these rumors." Convenient, you wouldn't have bullied them into silence, would you? How would a big boss like Wei Jianhong, daily occupied with a myriad of state affairs, know ordinary city folk like Wang Shao's parents? Thank you, good question. Bullying other children, cooperating with the investigation, rumors. On the surface, he was an old-style father with high expectations, but actually he was hinting to the City Bureau's criminal police officers that the so-called group sexual assault, whether it had taken place or not, could only be rumor no matter what the truth was. That would be the outcome. Wen Chen was young after all. His subtlety wasn't profound enough. Hearing these words, he couldn't keep from showing some satisfaction on his face. Oh, I hope he falls in love with us. I'm sorry, that sounds crude, but like, oh, he annoys me already. And it's so frustrating because it's these kinds of things that teach people like Wei Wenxian that they can just keep doing what they're doing and get away with it instead of like actually facing the consequences for their actions and maybe seeing the light of day and realizing that going like that. Then Charles' expression turned grim. Lower Jaw lifted an arm to block her. Taran, take them inside, Lower Jaw ordered, not looking at Xiaohai. He walked up from in front of Beidou, took something from his pockets and gave it to her. Here are the car keys. Don't hang around getting in the way of public business. Beat it. Beidou took the thing and smiled, glancing at Lan Chao and Xiaohai, who were subdued by Lord Zhou's public acknowledgement. Then he kissed his fingertips and pressed them to Lord Zhou's lips. Before Lord Zhou could knock his hand away, he quickly retreated, floating off. Please tell me he didn't do that. I don't think he would have, but please tell me he didn't do that in front of freaking Wei Jianghong's face because, oh no. Not gonna lie, this is very funny to listen to, not having read Mortal or seen it from the beginning at all. Okay, but have you watched Justice in the Dark? Because if not, you need to go do that immediately. You cannot not have watched Justice in the Dark. Lowen said, "What are you looking at? Get to work." 10 minutes later, the dejected Xiao Haiyang, turning his head 3 times for each step he. Why am I struggling? I'm stressing. Okay, sorry. Let's try this again. I can read, I promise. 10 minutes later, the dejected Xiao Haiyang, turning his head 3 times for each step he took, walked away from his teacher's busy criminal investigation team. He was as thin as bamboo pole and looked like a stray dog, almost seeming lonely as he walked through the rather desolate-seeming weekend morning street. He'd known that he might be fired over this, but he hadn't given up hope, trying to rescue himself. But he seemed to be going about the rescue in the wrong way. He felt that Lord Zhou had become even angrier when he'd seen him. Sorry, that came out very passionate, but it's so good. You have to watch it. Oh, especially if you, I don't know if you've ever watched Guardian, but if you enjoyed Guardian, I guarantee you will enjoy this. Um, or if you've been watched Under the Skin, it's great. Sorry. But he couldn't be a police officer. But if he couldn't be a police officer, what would he do? Xiaohaiyang's steps stopped on the pedestrian crossing, noticing that he didn't seem to be feeling the earth-shattering pain of being discharged from public employment. Beidou had been right. This job and Gujiao had been a heavy yoke weighing him down all these years. When he once put it down, before he could feel loss, he first felt faintly free. Am I this kind of person? He thought silently. Suddenly, a car on the cross street haunted him. Xiao Haiyang at first thought that he was blocking the way and, hastening his steps, walked over the pedestrian crossing. Then he looked again and saw that that seemed to be Captain Moore's car. The car window rolled down. Anyone who came along could have seen Beidou just shooed away by Lord Zhou, showing his face. I'm not gonna have a Guardian. It changed so much from the book, but Yeah, well, this one is much more accurate, I would say. Obviously, the same author, but I assume you know that. Um, so yeah, would highly recommend. Get in, Feidu said. No need, my house isn't far, Shahayam said. Then he remembered something and stiffly added, thank you. I don't want to take you home, Feidu laughed. I'm getting ready to go to the girl Wang Shao's house. And I don't remember her recorded address clearly. Do you remember it? I mean, he has an eidetic memory, so chances are good. Shah Hayyan stared. By the time he pulled himself together, he was already sitting in Feidu's car. Yes. Chapter 117, Verhovensky 27. Feidu perhaps bore the burden of being an unknown urban legend. His child abduction skills were consummate. With a few words, he duped Xiao Haiyang into his car, and on the way he even unhurriedly got out and pulled incense to hang in the car, sticking the dreadful scented air freshener into a roadside trash can. So all I will say is thank goodness Feidu decided to be on the light side, because if he decided to be a villain, he would be terrifying. Well, actually, it's not either of the main characters who has the eidetic memory. Starting from when he'd gone out of the car, Shao Haiyang was thinking, haven't I told him the address? Can't he use the GPS? Why do I need to act as his human GPS device like this? When Fady finished his finicky, urgent business, Little Glasses still hadn't worked out what was going on. He hadn't even unbuckled his seatbelt. How are you being a police officer when you're this naive? This is much better, right? The scent of berries dispelled from the white porcelain wrapped incense like a refreshing wind, washing the air inside the car clean. Fadu sighed. I've been driving his car for a few days, and the smell was about to give me a concussion. Zhao Haiyang wasn't in the mood to discuss these trifling matters of taste with him. He quickly pushed at his glasses and hastily put a hand on the door. You should know how to get there now. Could you put me down at the nearest subway entrance? Feidu looked at him in astonishment. Don't you want to come with me? Shao Haiyang's voice was somewhat dry. I've been suspended from duty. Isn't that just perfect? Feidu smiled. You've been suspended from duty, and I'm not on duty at all. The two of us are both ordinary citizens privately going to visit a little girl. I mean, that sounds a little bit dodgy when you put it like that, Feidu. That's not right. It isn't an official police questioning, and we don't need to notify her guardians. Fair, I guess. Shao Haiyang didn't make a sound. Feidu shrugged and indeed pulled the car over, stopping at a subway entrance, very carelessly saying, all right, if you don't want to come, then get out of the car. Sorry to bother you. People came and went at the subway entrance. A tiny newsstand was lying on its back, propping up a stool. A pot of rice for sale was cooking next to it. Shahayam opened the door crack, and the winter wind at once sealed his glasses with white mist. Bedu didn't urge him to stay. He turned on the car radio. The crisp-voiced presenter was just focusing on social topics. So right now, schoolyard bullying has once again become a popular subject. I don't know whether any of you experienced unknown grief at school. A friend whose phone number ended in 0039 says, this was when I was attending elementary school 14 years ago. Once some kids in my class stopped me, called me a sailor, and threw me into the river. There was a thin layer of frost on the river. It was bone-chillingly cold. My leg hadn't been right ever since. Wow, it seems that this warmly felt letter came from a rather ancient friend. His schoolmates really went overboard 40 years later and he still can't let it go. Shanghai drew back the foot he put outside the sun and silently closed the car door. Pulling a long face, he sat upright and attentive in the passenger seat. Beidou observed him and noticed something rather interesting. Shanghai's center of gravity was always placed forward, his shoulders and back were always tensed, and the gaze behind was full of vigilance, as though he was prepared to charge out at any time and blow up a pillbox or something. A trace of a smile came into the corner of Feidu's eyes. He put the car back into gear and stepped on the gas pedal. You may not have heard yesterday that Shasha Man gave up some details about the schoolyard bully. Feidu didn't seem at all concerned about divulging her confidences to him. He glanced out the corner of his eye at Shahaya, who was very focused, not daring to let a single word slip by. He continued, "We now suspect that there was sexual assault occurring at Newfound Middle School, but the people involved, both the rapist and the victim won't acknowledge it." Yes, go forth. Enjoy. I envy you being able to watch it for the first time again. Shahayang's eyes widened slightly, but Feidu didn't go on. He changed the subject. If not for that, Wang Shao would only be an ordinary student who took part in running away. You only dropped by her house once, and yet you can instantly read her address accurately. Repeat her address accurately. You really do have an eidetic memory. In fact, even a person with a true eidetic memory, suddenly asked for a completely unimportant minor detail, would still need some time to recall and react. To be able to blurt it out, he not only needed to have a good memory, it also had to be something he was very familiar with. This was Shao Haiyang's habit. Each time he received a new case, he'd spend time putting the jumble of information in order regardless of importance, then thinking it over repeatedly. Only, only then could he fill, mm, only then could he fulfill the function of a point-and-speak device, answering whenever someone else asked. Now, however, Shao Haiyang only lowered his head somewhat uncomfortably. He didn't explain. Truthfully, the average person, if he didn't want to go, would at most have told me the address. He wouldn't have gotten into the car as soon as I said to. So in your heart, you did want to go. Isn't that right? You keep saying unpleasant things, but actually you're still concerned about this case, or else you wouldn't have come running the day after being suspended to hand in a self-examination. Did you stay up all night writing? There were huge dark circles under Shahayang's eyes. He spoke at last. Writing the self-examination may not have done any good. His attempt to leak information had been unsuccessful. This matter could be big or small. It could all come to nothing. Or he could be discharged from public employment. It would all depend on how the person responsible handled it. Shahayang spat out of breath, looking at the steamed up windows, and grinned in self-mockery. Even if Lo Wen-zhou had originally planned to deal gently with him after the initial harshness, Shao Haiyang's unpleasant words had probably rendered him beside himself with rage. Feidu suddenly asked, "What kind of person was Officer Wu?" Oh, Shao Haiyang hadn't expected this question from him. He hesitated a moment, racked his brain, but all that came out of his mouth was a dry sentence. He was a good person, a very good person. Feidu didn't interrupt him. I don't know what he was after. He was quite grown up. He didn't look worse than anyone else, but he didn't have a family. He only lived by himself in a run-down little apartment, and he didn't have any desire to move up When he got his wages or bonus, he'd send some to his mother, then scatter the rest to subsidize all kinds of people who had nothing to do with him. He hardly spent any money himself. Sometimes I saw his friends come to visit, tell him off for letting all kinds of informers come over all the time and sponge off him, and he looked after them too, as though he could cover all of Yan City. But in fact, he had nothing himself. He had to ride a bicycle to work. That doesn't sound exactly like Blue Window, but there's definitely elements to me of Blue Window. Books said that great knights worked for the country and people, but what kind of knight was Wu Zhao? A poor knight, a scholarly knight, a bachelor knight, or a knight on a clanking bicycle? Shao Haiyang suddenly stopped talking. At the end of his endurance, he covered half his face with his hands. I wasn't doing it at anyone, I just felt that you couldn't do anything. Fedu unhurriedly finished for him. When you needed him, he boldly stood up, but when he needed you, you were powerless. These words somehow forced their way into Shao Haiyang's heart. His shoulders curled up, and the grown-up Shao he'd rigidly maintained for years suddenly collapsed, revealing the little boy who'd peeked through the crack in the door 14 years ago. I'm sorry. What are you apologizing for? They didn't respond to his fluctuating emotions. His cool words knocked Shao Haiyang back into the present. Do you really not know what it means that Captain Law covered up what you did? Shao Haiyang first looked at him blankly. A moment later, he suddenly came around and nearly leapt out of his seat. He, oh, well, Fedu's eyes curved. He parked the car steadily. We're here. Huang Shao's home must be here, right? Huang Shao's home was in an old neighborhood. The building had been a workplace dormitory before. Apparently, the property rights hadn't been handed over to this day. At the gates was a paralyzed old lady sunning herself in a wheelchair. The domestic waste, not cleared away in a timely manner, was piled up high beside her. Anyone with any means, even if it required a loan, had moved away. Those remaining were all the frail and elderly. The building and people both gave off a feeling of deathly constraint. There was a long corridor leading into the small dormitory-like building. It was poorly lit, dimming people's eyes as soon as they came in. Both sides were lined with little cage-like apartments with 20 to a floor, so densely crowded they made you think of a grid of chicken coops. Fedu carefully avoided a puddle of unknown liquid. I don't think the family can be so badly off that they'd need to live here. Shao Haiyang's answered reflexively. Wang Shao's parents both have regular work. They work at a public transportation company, and their income is actually all right. They're not idle after work either. They have part-time jobs to earn some extra spending money, but in order for her to be able to study abroad in the future, they haven't spent any money in all these years. Fedu carelessly asked, why does she absolutely have to go abroad? Apparently she wasn't keeping up well in junior middle, and the teachers advised her parents to let her abandon an ordinary senior middle school and go to a vocational college to learn a trade. The parents couldn't stand hearing this. They couldn't accept that their child would follow in their footsteps. They insisted madly that she gets sorry about that. Um, They insisted madly that she get a higher education. They made a fuss with the teachers. Then they heard about Euphem's international program somewhere and spent the money they'd been accumulating for down payments on a house to enroll her in it. Feidu looked at him. Shah Hayang uneasily avoided his line of sight. Background investigation I did before we interrogated the female teacher from Yufan. 204. Wang Shao lives here. As Shah Hayang, Wang Shao's parents were unwilling to waste any time. After leaving the city bureau, they had probably each gone to their respective part-time job. Her parents were like two donkeys struggling forward daily with their heads down, regardless of day and night, while the child was like a marionette tied to the donkey's tails, indifferently dragged along by them towards great expectations. Oh, why does that hurt to hear? Ay. Feidu knocked on the door. After a while, the people in the door darkened. There must be someone standing at the door, carefully looking out, but there was no movement. Wang Shao, Feidu spoke very naturally, as though what he was facing wasn't a door, but a living girl. We've come from the city bureau. You must remember Officer Shao, right? There was absolutely no movement inside, but there was still a shadow at the people. The girl must still have been standing there. We'd like to talk to you for a bit. Is that all right? Feidu said. Shao still didn't make a sound. Shahanyang really didn't know how to handle these situations. He looked at Feidu rather anxiously. But Feidu wasn't at all taken aback. I know there's something you want to say. They waited a while and heard the door creak open. But when the door was only open a crack, Feidu grabbed the handle from the outside and closed the door again. Dumbfounding Xiaohai, don't open the door. As he spoke, Feidu got the pen out of his coat pocket and plucked off an advertising leaflet stuck on the door. He wrote his phone number on it and put it through the crack under the door. Haven't the adults taught you not to open doors to strangers when you're alone? It's not safe. That's my number. Officer Shaw and I are going to your building's backyard to wait. You'll be able to see us out the window. If you want to talk, you can call that number. All right? Half of the leaflet with the phone number written on it was stuck under the door, and half of it was sticking out. After a moment, the paper was slowly pulled inside. Then Feidu gave Shahayan a look and walked out. Shahayan followed blankly. When they were outside, Shahayan couldn't resist quietly asking, why did you let her open the door? When two men who are basically strangers knock on the door, the most generous little girl will hesitate to open up. Never mind a girl like Wang Shao. She would never have let us in. There must have been a chain on the door. The winter wind outside the building swept over Feidu, and he shivered at once. He took the scarf hanging loosely around his neck and wrapped it around several times. I figured she wanted to send us away through the crack in the door. Shahayang still didn't understand what was the difference between talking through the door crack and talking over the phone while looking through the window. At least it was warmer in the corridor. I mean, besides the justifications that Feidu is about to give, I also just feel like this puts the power back in her hands and it delays the choice that she might have made, because if he'd allowed her to open that door, she might have sent them away and like closed off completely. Whereas now he's handed her the phone number, she's in control, she can decide whether or not to make the call, and it gave her a little bit of time to think about it while they made their way to the courtyard. So it's not an instantaneous shutdown. Sound carries in the hallway, and the neighbors are all so closely packed. Who knows how many ears there are on the the side of the wall. Under that kind of nervous strain, Wang Shao wouldn't say anything. If I give her my number, the initiative is hers. Also, houses like hers usually have burglar-proof windows. Looking out of the apartment will add to her sense of security. The door people walk through every day doesn't have the same influence. The casual displays of how well he understands human psychology is just amazing. I adore it so much. Shah Hayang nodded his head like an earnest elementary school student at Feidu's every full stop. He had entirely forgotten that when Feidu had kept down the information he'd leaked with a single phone call, he'd inwardly cursed him for his shamelessness. The two of them came to an empty backyard. When they were still approximately 30 or 40 meters from the building, Feidu stood still, not coming any closer. Sure enough, not long after he'd stopped, Feidu's phone began to ring. Feidu looked up. There was a curtain over the back window of 204. There were some unnatural folds at one corner of the thick curtain. Evidently, there was someone hiding behind it, pulling the curtain aside a bit to peek out. He split the phone's earbuds with Shao Haiyang and picked up. Hello? The girl's somewhat hoarse voice came over the headphones. Though she was still tense, at any rate she was speaking voluntarily. My parents already went to the city bureau this morning. We saw them, Lily said, but I still thought we could speak to you a little. I I don't have anything else to say, Ansha said quietly. I've answered everything I should have. I don't know about anything else. If there's nothing else, you can leave. Feidu had said that the phone would relieve Wang Shao's anxiety, but it was adding to Shao Haiyang's. He was nearly forced into a phobia of the telephone, thinking that if he breathed wrong, she would hang up the phone, and he wouldn't even have a chance to be rebuked for it. But Feidu didn't directly ask her the main question. He only said, "You knew that Shashanan was chosen as this year's deer, and that if she didn't run, she'd be bullied for a period of time in the future?" I know, Fengben said so. Fengben said, Feidu said, "Were you on good terms with Fengben and Shashanan? Were you friends?" "No," Wen Shao said after a silence. "I just said a few words to Shashanan. We were acquaintances. I wasn't familiar with Fengben. I'm very unsociable at school. I'm not likable. I don't have friends." Feidu raised his head slightly, smiling towards the closed window of the 204. "Since you were only an acquaintance, why were you willing to run away with them? If Shashanan took your place, the people bullying you would have shifted their attention to her, and you'd have been doing much better. Why didn't you tell anyone when you found out they were running away?" Wang Shao was silent, but contrary to Shao Haiyang's expectations, she didn't hang up. Feidu breathed out white steam and slowly said, "Sometimes a person's thoughts run free because external forces are constantly trying to mold you. They force you to accept mainstream tastes, force you to listen to whoever has the loudest voice, even if it doesn't accord with your logic or your character, even if it's entirely against your interests." Wang Shao quietly sucked in a breath. She seemed to be crying. But as long as the real you still has one last gasp left in her, she'll always be trying to make a weak noise. Feidu kept his eyes fixed on the curtain of 204, as though that was the girl's face. "Before, she told you to go with Fengben and the others, to try to rebel, to try to protect the schoolmate you actually didn't have any particular good relationship with. And now, doesn't she want to make the bad guys pay?" Oh, this hurts. "Wang Shao," Lady said quietly, When those girls locked you out of the dormitory, were you forced to go to the boys' dormitory? Did someone hurt you? Shohayan's heart came up to his throat. After a long time, the girl on the phone spoke weakly. She said, "No." Shohayan's heart crashed down so hard it hurt, along with his lungs. Peter sighed soundlessly and lowered his eyes. I, Aisha was sobbing, unable to catch her breath. "No, but I did hear about that person." Peter froze at once. Hastily followed up. "Which person?" "The person who killed Von Ben. That murderer." Okay, well, that's the end of the chapter. So, I am quickly gonna take my 10-minute break and we'll be back at 16 plus for at least another hour-ish reading. Let's try this again. We're back. Sorry. Everything up. Okay. I think if I can read quickly enough, we might just stick to 2 hours today. Because the first few, or the first hour, I actually managed to read quite a decent amount of pages. So let's hope for the best. Chapter 118, Verhovensky 28. Shah Hayyan gave a start. What did you say? Fedu hauled him back. You heard? Who did you hear from? I don't remember us making the murderer's identity public. It's at the Public Security Bureau. There was a lady who asked me if while we were outside I'd seen a man around 40 years old. She said he looked very strange with a very long chin, as though it had been padded, with his eye kind of crooked, very fierce looking. That had been a routine inquiry to determine whether the children who'd run away had seen Lord Beauchamp. They had described his facial features to them without telling them who he was. If he'd seemed familiar, they would have given him a photograph and a sketch. Evidently, this young lady had had her own guesses. I didn't leave the hotel when we were outside, and I didn't see that person. Michelle hesitated somewhat, but I'm not sure. No problem. Fedu softened his voice. Go ahead and tell us. Even if there's a misunderstanding, it's not serious. We have every Sunday off and we can go home. My parents don't rest on the weekend, and they're afraid of wasting my time, so they don't let me come home. That day, the other students had either gone home or gone out together to have fun. I was studying by myself in the classroom. I went to the bathroom midway, and when I was about to leave, I heard some people come in. It was Eugene and those other girls. Michelle paused. I was afraid of trouble if I ran into them, so I hid in the store until they left. They thought there was no one there and talked a little. I heard Eugene say, "What does that friend of Wellington do? He's so weird. He came and sat for 5 minutes and didn't even drink water. He wouldn't even take off his gloves." Shahayam's eyelids twitched. Not drinking on a public occasion and not taking off your gloves likely meant you were worried about leaving behind fingerprints or DNA. Wang Shao continued. Another girl said, "I don't think he can beat anyone important. He looks ferocious, and he's wall-eyed. Wall-eyed. It's pretty scary." Fabian gravely asked, "Do you remember when this happened?" "I do. It was the beginning of November," Wang Shao said. "It would have been the first weekend of November. It was Wei Wenxian's birthday, and he invited some people. All the people he hangs out with friends." Was Feng Bin there too? He was. They used to be on pretty good terms. Robosheng, who had disappeared 15 years ago, had turned up at a middle school birthday party. No matter how you thought about it, it sounded inconceivable. In the 327 case, the other two suspects had been in it for the money. Only Robosheng had been in it for the pleasure of killing and playing with the bodies. That doesn't sound great. As an out-and-out psychopath like that wouldn't have given Wei Wenxian a second look. Sorry, an out-and-out psychopath like that wouldn't have given Wei Wenxian a second look if he'd even been his own son. Huang Shao said he'd been wearing gloves and wouldn't drink anything, so what had he been there for? It sounded like he'd gone to recognize an assassination target. Like, and then, oh, I don't know why it just gets more grim the more we find out. The mysterious individual Go asked Shatov had already been in contact with someone at the time, and the daring boy had started planning a sensational rebellion and revelation, not knowing that he was already being watched. Where was this? Peter said. Do you know? I don't know. They didn't say. Shahayam frowned. But then Wang Shao thought about it and added, I heard a girl say something like that restaurant's Buddha jumps over the wall wasn't a traditional one. There was a baby bok choy in it. There was baby bok choy in it. It was hilarious. Yang Yujing had always liked Wei Wenjun a lot. She got angry when she heard this and told her not to talk blindly about things she didn't understand. And she said that they'd made a modified dish that was adjusted to be better for your health or something. Got it. Bayon's long ear center. Oh, hearing the words baby bok choy. Sorry, wow, why am I struggling? On hearing the words baby bok choy, Seidu already understood. Thank you. You've been a great help. The curtain of 204 was pulled open, and a hand wiped away the fog on the window.
White, haggard face appeared and looked out at them through the cage-like anti-burglary grid. Her features could be called pretty and delicate, but the look in her eyes were gloomy, and her expression was somewhat cowering. Living in perpetual constraint and suffering had left a layer of ash over the girl. It wasn't at all pleasing to the eye. Oy. There was stillness over the phone. The girl was silent for a good while, but she didn't seem about to end the call, as though she had something else to say. Zhao Haiyang was at first burning with impatience, wishing to take wing, fly back to the city bureau and turn this Longyun center upside down. But perhaps he was influenced by Feidu's patience. He looked up at Wang Shao, and his roiling emotions slowly calmed down. His mind wandered, and he remembered many things. He remembered 14 years ago all the malicious gossip the neighbors had talked when they pointed to Gu Zhao's empty apartment. Remembered his young self picking up a half a brick to fight them over it, though he didn't have the makings of a hero, and every time he tried to fight back, he'd be knocked over to the ground and trampled by a foot on his back. The two men stood in the winter wind that could freeze a person in place, each wearing one earbud, waiting for the imprisoned Rapunzel to let down her hair. This poor girl. I'm I'm not pretty. I'm not good at school, and I don't get along with people, Wang Shao said suddenly. I'm a burden on my parents, making them run around in circles each day. They say that we still live in the place for my sake. They tell me every day to make a good showing, but I can't do it. I've spent so much of my family's money, and now I don't even know whether I can continue attending school. Wouldn't it be better if someone like me, for someone like me to die? Fedu said, You. He'd only said one word when Xiao Haiyang interrupted him. My disposition is very strange when I was little, Xiao Haiyang said stiffly. He found Fedu looking at him and grinned rather self-mockingly. My disposition is still very strange now. Maybe it's innate. Others don't like hanging out with me, and I don't especially get along with my colleagues. When my parents got divorced, my dad pointed to me and said to my mom, You take this burden, I'll give you some more money. I've always been useless. Look, I'm a police officer, and once on the way home I ran into a pickpocket and wanted to chase him. The upshot was that the pickpocket knocked me over, and I watched him make his getaway. But I still wanted to keep trying. The days ahead are so long. Perhaps one day it'll get better. Well, what if? Wang Shao leaned against the window and cried. If one day you decide to make some people pay, no need to call 110. Call this number and I'll come straight away to take you to the city bureau. After exhorting her, Fei Du pushed Shao Haiyang. Come on. Shao Haiyang followed him quietly. When the car's heating had warmed his hands and feet, he finally worked up the courage to speak. What what should I do in my situation to be able to rejoin the team? Fei Du seemed to have his whole attention focused on the traffic situation up ahead. Shao Haiyang at once added nervously, You said before that Captain Law didn't tell people that I was suspended, so you're so good at talking. Could you look at that self-examination for me and see what I did wrong? I'm glad he didn't ask him to talk to Law Wenjo on his behalf, because I feel like that would have been the exact wrong thing to do. Fei Du smiled. Does your boss normally like reading other people's self-examinations to amuse himself? Shao Haiyang's face was blank. The car drove through an intersection. Fei Du shook his head, took a work ID out of his pocket, and tossed it at the dumbfounded Shao Haiyang. Hi. So context is the first 8 episodes were released, and then the series was suspended and was resold to Japan earlier this year and restarted and fully released. So that might be why you started it but never got to finish it. Hallucinating his sister. No. He does not have a sister. Definitely not. You might be thinking about his mother, but I don't know if you're thinking about the right show. Meanwhile, Lu Wenzhou was in front of the surveillance feed watching Wei Wenchen. Perhaps he looked this way naturally or something. There was always a trace of an indescribable smile hanging on Wei Wenchuan's lips. Only 15 or 16 years old, and that seemingly painted-on smile didn't waver a bit when he was faced with 2 police officers questioning him by turns. I can't remember if we actually get through Wei Wenchuan's emotional defenses or not. But as much as I would love Fei Du to be the one to get through his defenses, because I think it would be fascinating to watch, equally, I feel like Wei Wenchuan is the villainized version of a younger Fei Du, and the only person who is good at wrong-footing Fei Du is Lo Wenzhou. So I have faith that he could also be able to do it and do it very satisfyingly. Wei Wenchuan, someone gave evidence saying that you are the leader of a group at the school and frequently incite others to bully their schoolmates, bringing about personal insult and bodily harm. Do you acknowledge it? Wei Wenchuan shrugged and raised his neat brows, spreading his hands. What does a group mean? Jie, are there some colleagues you normally hang out with? If frequently spending time with my schoolmates calling being a group, then aren't you in a clique with those colleagues you're on good terms with? Ling Chao's face darkened. You're being questioned here. Shut up, talk nonsense again and we'll detain you. I love her. Her words, good for scaring small children, didn't touch Wei Wenchuan at all. The teenage boy smiled again. Police officer Jie, you can't detain me without any reason, can you? As for personal insult and bodily harm, who did I insult? Who did I harm? Is there video or audio evidence showing that I insulted someone? Shouldn't there be a doctor's report for the condition of an injury? Taran frowned, looking at Wei Wenchuan, who wasn't falling for any of this. Wei Wenchuan, I hope you can correct your attitude. We have hard evidence to show that you're connected to a case of group sexual assault. Your family circumstances are excellent, your grades are also good, and your future prospects are great. I suppose you don't want to get a criminal record and go to prison for a few years. Sexually assaulted who? Wang Xiao? Wei Wenchuan covered his eyes. He was silent for a while, then sneered and said, Don't joke, officer. Please, take a look at me. Now look at Wang Xiao. The way she is, if I touched a hair on her head, wouldn't I be the one getting the worst of it? Could you tell me what your so-called hard evidence is? Did Wang Xiao herself say so? Heavens, ugly people really will do anything for attention. Ugh. Don't put on your act here. What explanation do you have for installing a tracking device on your female schoolmate's cell phone? This time, Wei Wenchuan at least temporarily froze, disbelieving anger instantly rising on his face, though he didn't dare to believe that Sha Shanan had had the guts to sell him out. Then he quickly calmed once again. He leaned back, lowering his eyelids. You mean Sha Shanan? Yeah, I did that. Sha Shanan looks alright. I thought she'd do, so I had a bit of fun with her. Anyway, I didn't violate her privacy. I wasn't spying on her. I installed the tracking device right in front of her face. If she didn't like it, she could have removed it herself. Even if she was, I don't like that, she could have just not used the phone, right? Are mutually consenting to things also a crime? Since you installed the tracking device on Sha Shanan's phone, why didn't you provide a lead when the teachers and the police were searching for them? Fair point. If it was all in good fun. No one asked me, Wei Wenchuan said confidently, knowing he had justice on his side. Anyway, what did it have to do with me? But when Feng Bin was murdered, the murderer used a tracking device on her phone to follow them. Taran said gravely, What do you have to say about that? Wei Wenchuan's gaze didn't dodge away at all. He looked openly back at Taran, a false smile emerging at the corner of his mouth. First, have you caught the killer? Did the killer himself acknowledge that he used that tracking device to find Feng Bin? Second, even if he did, that tracking device is very crude. Anyone could have gone through the software to find her. Why are you saying it has to do with me? Third, you're saying that when Feng Bin died, Sha Shanan was with him? Then why did the murderer kill Feng Bin, but not kill her? Doesn't that show that there's a problem with her? Anyway, what does this have to do with me? I hate that he has a point. We know it's him. But at the same time, it's very, very, very circumstantial on the police's side at the moment. Lowenjaw was at the end of his endurance and was just about to personally enter a battle and take care of this little asshole when his phone rang. Bayan's long years center. His steps paused at once, his voice heavily leaving his throat. Are you sure? No. Keep this a secret. Don't come over. And keep an eye on that dumbass Xiao Haiyang. We'll talk about it when I get home. Lo and Joe hung up the phone. Standing in place, he could feel his heart thumping wildly. Alone, he paced 2 circles in the observation room and drank half a cup of tea in one gulp. By the time he picked up his walkie-talkie again, he had his expression under control. If he won't acknowledge it, hold him for a day. Some upbringing he's had. In a faintly angry voice, he said, "Find some guys who keep questioning him in turns. I still don't believe a little whelp would be up to this." Half an hour later, Law and Joe had called each of the criminal investigation team's associated direct superiors to report on the work. He strolled into the corridor and, seemingly aimlessly, raised his head and looked at the security camera in a corner. As though in provocation, he lit a cigarette towards it and slowly walked out. There are people who have changed. These were the most shocking words in Lao Yang's testament. When they'd gone to arrest Zheng Kaifeng, because there had been a leak, Zheng Kaifeng had received word ahead of time and run away. And afterwards, the person behind the scenes had had the opportunity to murder and silence. This time, they absolutely couldn't alert the enemy. Owen Joe went outside, expressionlessly tapping his cigarettes into a trash can, and turned his head to look back at the office building bearing the national emblem. He had a sudden premonition that they were very close to the truth. Shao Haiyang sat cautiously in Lo and Joe's living room, exchanging a helpless look with Lo Yiguo. Having woken from its drunken stupor, Lo Yiguo was bristling, circling around Shao Haiyang in displeasure. Its big, fluffy tail touched Shao Haiyang's pant leg. Master Cat majestically displayed its fangs, hissing at him. Shao Haiyang suddenly pulled his leg back, his posture becoming even more cautious. Lo Yiguo had verified its judgment that this was an easily bullied human. It put on a look of arrogant disdain, jumped onto the coffee table, and sat up in a lump, throwing out its chest, maintaining an impenetrable watch on Shao Haiyang. Oh my word. Feidu poured Shao Haiyang a cup of tea, taking advantage of Lo and Joe not being home. He also sneakily got into the liquor cabinet he'd scouted out yesterday, picking and choosing among the reasonably priced red wines. Finding one general sticking out among the ranks, he poured himself a glass. Lo Yiguo smelled the wine, and its mood immediately changed. It trotted over to his feet, purring as it rubbed against his pant legs. Seeing that Feidu wasn't intending to pay attention to it, Lo Yiguo couldn't resist reaching out its paw and attempting to grab his pant leg and climb up like it usually did to Lo and Joe. Feidu sipped some wine and looked down at the cat. Oh goodness. Lo Yiguo's half-outstretched paw froze in midair for a moment. Then it drew back and obediently rolled itself into a furry ball, not daring to act rashly. Oh, the parent and child dynamics that we somehow got with Lo and Joe, Feidu, and Lo Yiguo is just amazing. Shao Haiyang was watching him. "Your cat is pretty well behaved." "It's Lo and Joe's," Feidu said, pretending this was nothing out of the ordinary, "though I've been feeding it lately." Hearing this, the average person would wonder why he'd been feeding Lo and Joe's cat and asked in astonishment, "Are you living in Captain Lo's house?" But Comrade Shao Haiyang wasn't the average person. His mind was filled with Lo Gusheng. All his tossing and turning was about the wanted criminal, and he had no attention to spare for anything else. Feidu had kidnapped him and brought him here, and he had no idea that he was currently sitting on the couch in Lo and Joe's house. He gave an "oh," disregarding Feidu's veiled boast, and said in deadly earnest, I've just been thinking, if the person Wang Shao heard about was in fact Lu Guosheng, then why, when he normally takes care not to leave any traces of himself, would he leave his fingerprint the day he killed Feng Bin? They do. Dot dot dot. Were all the police officers the city bureau recruited this slow? Brutal. But absolutely hilarious as well. Chapter 119, Verhovensky 29. Shao Haiyang's face was full of sincere gravity. Fei Du had to expressionlessly swallow down his words along with a mouthful of wine. He slowly strolled over and sat down on the other end of the couch, smoothly stretching out his long legs. There are security cameras around scenic areas. Lu Guosheng's physical characteristics haven't changed much over the last several years. He knew before he acted that he would be filmed, so whether he wore gloves or not didn't make much difference. I think that after hiding for 15 years, a person may yearn for freedom. Normally, he has to wear gloves, has to be careful, because as soon as he's exposed, the public security system will have its eyes on him. But the day he committed the murder was different. He knew there would be someone to come to rescue him. He could enjoy the killing, then slip away. It's horrifying. For a wanted criminal like Lu Guosheng, shouldering a burden of quite a few lives, it was a matter of indifference to add one more, as long as the police didn't catch him. A wanted criminal with a bad reputation and a clear identity showing up on the surveillance network is undoubtedly a very good shield for the employer behind him. Faced with a proper business, Shao Haiyang's brain moved fairly quickly. He nodded at once. I understand that, but there's another contradictory point. He killed the boy and found the girl's phone, but he left her. Why is that? Could he possibly not have known that the police would question Sha Nan? As soon as that happened, wouldn't the employer he'd worked so hard to shield be revealed? Fei Du didn't answer at once. While he was quiet, Lui Guo cuddled up to him and put its head on his lap. Having found a heat source, it soon fell asleep on him. My heart. There were many possible reasons for Lu Guosheng not killing Sha Nan. It may have been at his employer's request. Perhaps Sha Nan, having betrayed Feng Bin, had been taken by the killer behind the scenes for one of his own people. Perhaps because she was pretty, he wanted to preserve her as a spoil of war, and was unwilling to kill her. Perhaps the young and frivolous employer had innocently thought that if he only threatened her enough, the girl would keep her mouth shut and the police wouldn't get anything out of her. Yeah, that shows the naive youth that he so amusingly doesn't think he falls into. It may also have been the reason of Lu Guosheng's. After all, in the heavy debt of blood he carried, not one of his victims had been female. Some psychopathic killers had mental states that were hard to appraise using normal logic. Amidst their cold-bloodedness, owing to some deep-seated psychological reason, they would be tender-hearted towards people possessing certain characteristics. Until they'd taken Lu Guosheng alive, this was all unknown. The only thing they could be sure of was that if Sha Nan had died in the garbage bin, the bodies of the boy and girl would have been found together, and with the girl's phone taken away, no one would have known that one of the victims had also been a participant. It would only have looked like misfortune. At most, the police, unable to catch the wanted criminal, would have been hauled out for a round of condemnation. Now, however, all kinds of coincidences had turned this assassination, which should have been watertight, into a bungled performance. Not long after the Zhou clan case. Almost like their not friend, is working in the shadows. If it had been so easy for those people to slip up, they would all have been scooped up long ago. They couldn't have survived up to this point. Lo and Zhou only came home at twilight, bringing Taran along. They'd taken a taxi and carried in big and small bags of hot pot ingredients, as though they were planning to hold a weekend party in an interval between working overtime. Stirring as Lo and Zhou got out his keys and opened the door, then familiarly stepping out of his shoes and kicking them towards the shoe cabinet, Shao Haiyang was at last belatedly confused. Entirely at a loss, he thought, whose house is this anyway? You got there. Eventually, sort of. Taran, beaming, passed Feidu, an opaque cloth bag. I see Xiao Xiao is also here to scrounge a meal. Xiao Haiyang, ... He'd wanted to leave a few times that afternoon, but Feidu had told him to wait a while longer. Xiao Haiyang had been waiting expectantly for someone to come and arrange some secret investigation work. He hadn't thought that he was waiting for hot pots. Xiao Haiyang said, well, I came to... Feidu opened the cloth bag Taran had given him and looked inside, seeing a small, pitch-black instrument, an anti-reconnaissance device. He came to hand in his self-examination, Feidu said knowingly, casually interrupting Xiao Haiyang's words. And he was planning to apologize to you and say he shouldn't have spoken rudely and contradicted his superior in a public place yesterday. By way of apology, he bought 2 bags of imported cat food. Isn't that right, little fellow? Let's hope little fellow got the hint. Xiao Haiyang ... Feidu had bought the cat food at the supermarket outside. Xiao Haiyang was all at sea right now, but due to the blind faith he'd built up towards Feidu during the day, he shut his mouth and said nothing. Imported? Lo and Zhou looked at Xiao Haiyang. Ours is a native Chinese cat. It doesn't eat imported food. If you feed it the wrong thing, look out for it turning over its bowl. Before he could finish speaking, he looked up and saw Lo Yiguo, its butt sticking up, waving its tail as it chewed with its head down. Judging from its body language, its mood was rather cheerful. Oh, Lord. It had no intention of knocking over pots and throwing around dishes. Lo and Zhou, ... the ungrateful little beast. The hot pot ingredients were all ready made and didn't require any effort to handle. Even a novice like Feidu could deal with them. Taran and Xiao Haiyang set up the hot pot to boil the base and sat down beside it to chat and keep Lo Yiguo away. Feidu meanwhile went to the kitchen to help wash vegetables. As soon as he set one foot in the kitchen, Lo and Zhou sniffed gently. Have you been drinking? ... Feidu was taken unawares by this question because he hadn't thought that a man who spent his time in company with a solid air freshener could have such a sensitive sense of smell. He denied it on the spot. No, it was grape juice. I mean, by his standards, whatever wine Lo and Zhou has probably qualifies as grape juice because it's not fancy enough. Lo and Zhou dodged left and right, checking on Taran and Xiao Haiyang's positions in the dining room. Then, without warning, he pressed Feidu into the corner of out of their line of sight and personally tasted his mouth. Sir, you have company. The kitchen door was half open. If they'd only stuck out their heads, Taran and Xiao Haiyang would have seen. Feidu could even hear their low voices. Lowenjo's sudden surprise attack of a kiss was unusually turbulent, almost fretful, entirely at odds with the relaxed and cheerful atmosphere of the weekend hotpot gathering. Likely anyone faced with a knife to the back would have found it difficult to maintain true calm. The winter air was dry and the lips were delicate. Feidu hissed and hurriedly turned his head away slightly, grabbing Lowenjo's hand, almost inaudibly saying into his ear, "Darling, if you bite through and I bleed, you'd have to carry me out of here on your back." Not the darling, though. Lowenjo already had the results of his analysis and smacked him indignantly. "I'll carry you out over my shoulder. You weren't drinking? Do you ever tell the truth?" Feidu turned his head to cover up his entirely unrepentant smile and gently licked Lowenjo's earlobe. When he gave a start, Feidu took the opportunity to firmly pick up the washed mushrooms and float out. Oh my word. The powerful, invasive scent of the hot pot was bubbling out out of the pot. All kinds of meat, vegetables, and seafood were laid out on the spacious dining table, looking very sumptuous. Lo Yiguo followed the smell over and cried out urgently, turning around and around under the table. The four people, however, wore grave expressions. "Who says you aren't sociable? Isn't eating hot pot with us after work sociable? Shao Shao, don't resist. All it takes for people to get familiar is eating a couple of meals together. Tomorrow we have to go back to work. Let's eat well today, substituting tea for wine. Cheers." Taran's voice seemed to hold a smile, but there was no sign of it on his face. His rather solemn he rather solemnly accepted the anti-reconnaissance device and made a ready hand gesture at Lo Wenzhou. Xiao Haiyang expressionlessly raised 2 cups and clinked them together. The fact that they so accurately recreated the scene in the live action, like they went the extra mile, I swear. Um, Bubbles rose from the hot pot. An indicator light blinked faintly, letting out an invisible scanning signal. Lo Wenzhou took the detector of the anti-reconnaissance device and stood up. "We'll call this business over. Xiao Haiyang, there are all kinds of bosses. After this, pay attention to how you speak when you're outside. Not everyone would put up with you like I do. I'll go see if the noodles have softened up." Saying so, he went around the room with the detector, even carefully probing the pairs of shoes next to the shoe cabinet at the door. "Feidu, don't play on your phone, alright? How much money do you need to make that you don't even have time to eat a meal properly?" Taran heard his implication and immediately picked it up. "Everyone, turn off your phones. We'll take a tip from the internet and put all the phones together. No one's allowed to touch them. Anyone who can't hold out will cover the cost of today's food." Feidu got out a signal blocking paper bag, collecting everyone's phones, and tossed them into the bag. When Lo Wenzhou was approaching the entrance hall, the red light suddenly lit up. Lo Wenzhou's expression instantly altered. At once, Taran turned the sound up on the TV, and they all looked at the indicator light on the anti-reconnaissance device. It flashed unsteadily at as Lo Wenzhou moved around. After a moment, Lo Wenzhou took Taran's worn-out briefcase down from the clothes rack. Against the background of the deafening music from the TV, he went through Taran's bag. Stuck in an inside pocket was a listening device. There we go. Damn it. The four of them silently concentrated their gazes on the little thing. Only Lo Yiguo's attention was still on the food. Seeing no one was paying attention to it, it let out a displeased howl. Wenjo's gaze moved. He walked over, carrying the bag, and picked Loigo up with one hand. Loigo's legs dangled in the air. It didn't know whether the little box attendant's problem was and gave a thin cry. Oh no. Against the background of the cat's cry, Wenjo scooped out a cup of boiling water and poured it over the listening device. There was a crackling sound, and the old leather of the briefcase let out a strange smell. The flickering red light on the anti-reconnaissance device calmed. No one spoke for a good while. Wenjo released the scapegoat knight Loigo and spoke first to break the silence. Tao Tao, you've been carrying this crappy bag for 10 years. There's 2 gaps in one zipper. It must be about time to change it. I have some new ones here. You can go and pick out whichever one you like later. Taran forced a smile. Fine, give me the most expensive one. Xiao Haiyang said, Who is it? Taran had calmed down from his initial shock. He drank a mouthful of herbal tea. It could be anyone. There's nothing in my bag that's worth any money. I don't normally pay attention to it. Just toss it somewhere. When it's crowded on the subway, any place you hand your bag in to be checked, all the acquaintances I've seen recently, informers, witnesses I've gone to see, victims, anyone could have had an opportunity. It doesn't necessarily have to be one of our people. Sure, Fedu unhurriedly put a few pieces of meat into the hot pot. If it had been me, I'd have put a listening device on Lao Luo, at least one for each of the 2 of you. Damn it. Lu Wenjo's office was basically a public space, and his things were thrown casually around the city bureau. Any colleague who was short on spending money to buy cigarettes could give a shout and just take the money from his bag. If it was someone from the criminal investigation team, the difficulty involved in planting something on either of them was about the same. There weren't any obstacles. Wenjo let out a long breath, his voice so low it was almost drowned among the steam. Lao Yang's testament mentioned the 327 case and Gu Zhao, so this person must be a contemporary of theirs, or even older. It's likely to be some old leader of good standing and reputation. Perhaps that's the reason why they established their headquarters here. Xiao Haiyang stared stupidly at one and then another. Which Lao Yang are you talking about? Taran gave Wenjo a questioning look. Wenjo patted Xiao Haiyang on the shoulder and briefly explained. This dumbass was raised by Gu Zhao. He counts as a relative of an elder and a victim. Feidu shrugged. And I'm a relative of a criminal who betrayed the organization and a victim. Taran and I have been investigating the truth behind Lao Yang's death 3 years ago, Lo Wenjo said. Recently, Shenyang gave us Lao Yang's testament. We all have different information now. Let's get each other up to date as we eat. They were like a group of people groping around in the darkness who, whether from private motives or public duty, had by coincidence set foot on the path to seek the same abyss and had staggered along, moving forward with their eyes closed for this long. Now all their roads were, with their different starts, placed and different endings, had finally met at the same point. There was a fragmentary flame flickering in the mists, faintly revealing the shape of the abyss. Ooh! That's a beautiful sentence! Wow. We can temporarily detain Wei Wenquan and his father, Lu Wenzhou said, but we can't hold them for long because we don't have any evidence. And Wei Wenquan is a minor. The 2 of them know it, so they feel very secure. Time is tight. What should our next step be? It's not very convenient to simply investigate this Beiyan Longyuan center of yours. I looked it up. That building was built by Wei Damhong. It's their own property. We could obtain the security camera records from around there, but investigating surveillance footage requires an application and proper grounds. I can't just make it happen by saying so. There are many eyes on the team. Even if a bug in Tyrant's bag wasn't put there by one of our people, it'll still make it hard to keep a secret. Until we make a definitive strike, we can't disclose this information. Tyrant said, "What about informers? Can informers be trusted?" Shahayang asked. "They come from all over the place, and you don't know what kind of people they normally come into contact with or who they get favors from. I always suspect that what happened to Uncle Boo was related to a mole among his informers." Luckily, we have Fei Du, who has people he trusts. Just then, Fei Du, who hadn't spoken at all this time, suddenly said, "We can use my people." Sorry. Okay, so I think I'm gonna end it there for today because we still got a decent amount done. And I just don't want to be too pressed for time, even though it would have been great to get another hour in. So yeah, I hope you guys still enjoyed. Sorry for the very short notice and the very early time. But thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you guys on Tuesday for the next live stream. 再见。